Our first interview is with Bridget Partridge, formerly Sister Liguori, who in July 1920 left her convent at Mount Erin, Wagga Wagga, in controversial circumstances. Bridget Partridge, thanks for agreeing to do this interview. Perhaps the question that most people would like answered is, why did you run away from Mount Erin Convent?
I had become dissatisfied with conventual life, and on account of a dispute over a broom, when Sister Joan accused me of lying, I decided to leave the convent.
That was the first time you left, and that was on Saturday the 24th of July. What time did you leave?
About 12:30. I went out the back way and went to Mrs. Burgess's house.
And why did you do that?
I intended to wait there until order had been restored.
Now, while you were at Mrs. Burgess's house, you tried to ring Bishop Dwyer.
Yes, I wanted to tell him where I was staying and to explain the incident.
Over the broom.
Yes. But when I rang, I was told he was in Albury.
What happened then?
I remained at Mrs. Burgess's for several hours. And then, between 4 and 5, Mother Clare and Sister Brendan came to take me back to the convent.
What happened when you went back?
I was told to go to bed by the Reverend Mother. When I got upstairs, Sister Brendan started to make up my bed. I told her I was well and fit to make it myself. Then holy water was shaken round my bed by Sister Brendan.
Did you see the doctor that evening?
Yes, Dr. Lay came to the convent. He said, "So you are run down, sister." I said, "Yes, doctor." I was asked to put out my tongue. No further questions were asked about my health, and no examination was made. The Angelus bell rang, and he then said goodbye. I was told to go to bed by the Reverend Mother, and I went to bed as told, and Sister Brendan came up and said, "Here's a dose of oil for you." When I drank it, she said, "You won't want another dose, sister." Sister Brendan then took the pillows from my head, placed my hands by my side, and said, "You won't get out of this bed for the next 6 months."
Now, you've said that you thought that Sister Brendan gave you poison in the castor oil.
Yes, I really thought it was poison.
Why did you think that?
This conviction is based on the agonizing look on the doctor's face during the Angelus. The Reverend Mother could not look at me at all. There was certainly castor oil in the cup, but to a very small degree, and the oil was of a darkish colour, which tasted like ink.
But wasn't the practice to mix castor oil with black coffee, a dose that was never agreeable?
Yes. But also, Sister Brendan told me to lie quite still and not to move, and that I would sleep for 6 months. Other things were said about death to convince me I was to die.
What happened next?
Because I was suspicious it was not all oil, I got out of bed and drank 3 cups of soapy water and went to the lavatory and brought up the dose as best I could.
Did you then go back to bed?
No. Sister Brendan had told me she would get a hot water bottle for my feet. I told her I would be in bed by the time she came back. When Sister Brendan went downstairs to get the hot water bottle, I made my escape.
Now, you were only in your nightdress and bare feet.
Yes. I thought that if I went to get my clothes, I would never get a chance to get away again.
Which way did you go?
I went to Mrs. Burgess's. She asked me to remain for the night, but, growing afraid, I asked her to take me further away.
Where did you go then?
We went to the Church of England hostel, which was locked up, and then to Mrs. Thompson's.
And you stayed there for the night?
Yes.
Now, the next morning you were examined by Dr. Tivy and you spoke to Inspector Dupre.
Yes.
Did you tell them you believed you had been given poison and that the Mother Superior, Sister Brendan, and Dr. Lay had tried to murder you?
No, but I told Mrs. Thompson.
Why did you not tell the Inspector of Police?
I did not think of it at the time. I thought it sufficient to tell Mrs. Thompson, and if she thought it necessary to mention it, she would do so.
Do you still think it was deliberately planned to murder you?
I am in two minds. I think there was some punishment intended for me, that I was going to be punished for running away. I think now that it was a sleeping draught for some further ill treatment they were planning ahead.
That is what you think now, that you were to be sent asleep and then tortured in your sleep?
Ill-treated.
By whom?
By the sisters.
While you were unconscious?
I would not be fully unconscious.
Is that the view you have brought yourself now to take of it?
Yes.
Thank you, Miss Partridge, for speaking with us today and giving us an understanding of why you left the convent back then. Our next interview is with Dr. Joseph Dwyer, Bishop of Wagga Wagga from 1918 to 1939. Bishop Dwyer, thank you for agreeing to this interview.
Thanks for having me.
Did you know Sister Liguori, now Bridget Partridge, before she fled the Mount Erin convent on Saturday the 24th of July 1920?
Yes, but I knew very little about her. I met her, I think, on 3 occasions to speak to, and on these occasions I would not have seen her for more than 2 minutes.
One of these occasions was earlier that year when you put to her the questions you are required to, namely, are you in good health? Have you any complaint to make to me as bishop? And are you perfectly happy and contented?
That was on my episcopal visit in May.
Did she give any indication of being dissatisfied?
None whatever.
What are your duties with regard to a member of a religious community who may desire to leave?
I have a duty under canon law to investigate cases of complaints or unhappiness, if any, and see if they can be in any way remedied. If the complainant wishes deliberately to leave the community, I have to see that arrangements are made that she is decently conveyed back to parents, relatives, or friends.
You were in Albury the weekend Sister Liguori left the convent. But when you returned on the Monday afternoon, Father Barry filled you in on what had happened. He also gave you a letter that Sister Liguori had written to you, in which she wrote that Dr. Lay had given her poison to end her life, that she had fled from the Mount Erin convent and did not wish to go back, where her deathbed had been fixed for her, as she said. Did you write a letter in reply?
Yes. I wrote 2 letters. One to Sister Liguori, and one to Mr. and Mrs. Thompson. In the letter to Sister Liguori I wrote, I have just returned from Albury and received the letter you sent to me. I regret the course you have taken without consulting me and am willing to see you if you wish. I asked Father Barry to deliver the letters, but Mrs. Thompson refused to accept the one addressed to Sister Liguori.
The next day, in the company of Inspector Dupre, you called on Mrs. Thompson to personally deliver the letter, and she told you Sister Liguori was not there. Did you believe her?
Mrs. Thompson said, she is not here now, she has gone away. Mrs. Thompson added that Sister Liguori went away on the Sunday afternoon. I was still of the opinion that the sister was in the house. Later that day I asked Police Sergeant Gallagher if he would be good enough to have the letter intended for Sister Liguori delivered at Thompson's house. He returned with the letter, it not having been delivered. On the same afternoon, still believing the sister was at the Thompsons, I asked Mr. Burns, a stock and station agent, to deliver the letter to her. Mrs. Thompson again said that Sister Liguori was not there. Presently Archdeacon Pike emerged from a room at the house, and said to Mr. Burns, I give you my word, Sister Liguori is not here. She is in another town and is all right.
What did you do next?
I was still not sure that the Sister Liguori had left Wagga. I had conflicting statements and had no idea where she was, although I suspected she had gone somewhere. I intended to go to Sydney that night, but as it had been reported to me that Dr. Lay was of the opinion that the sister was deranged, I rang him up and told him I was leaving for Sydney and asked if he had expressed the opinion that Sister Liguori was deranged. Dr. Lay replied that he had. I asked, "Will you give a written certificate to that effect?" He said he would the next day. I went to Sydney that night.
In Sydney, you spoke to the Attorney General, who referred you to the Inspector General of Police.
Yes. I told the Inspector General the facts as I knew them and showed him the letter I had received from Sister Liguori. He simply said, "This letter does not seem to be written by a person of normal mind." He promised to ring up the inspector at Wagga and ask him if he could locate the sister.
The next morning, you received a reply from the Inspector General stating he had received a wire from Inspector Dupre to the effect that Archdeacon Pike refused to say where Sister Liguori was at present, but that she was well cared for.
Yes.
And that Dupre had said that Sister Liguori appeared perfectly sane and rational when he saw her on the 25th.
Yes.
And that Dr. Tivy had told Dupre he could find no indication of insanity and that she was perfectly normal.
Yes.
That was all in the Inspector General's letter.
Yes.
What did you do next?
I left for Wagga the same night. The next morning Inspector Dupre said that Archdeacon Pike knew where Sister Liguori was and that he would give me some information if I applied to him. I replied, "What has Archdeacon Pike got to do with it?" I also said that I would not go near him, or any of the mob with him.
Now, this I don't understand. If you were anxious to learn of Sister Liguori's whereabouts, why did you not ring up Archdeacon Pike?
First of all, I had a report from Burns, whom I had sent as my messenger to deliver the letter, that Archdeacon Pike said he knew where the girl was, and would not tell.
You said you would not go within a mile of him and his crowd. What did you mean by that?
There was so much secrecy. I did not know who these people were. They had lied to us and lied to the police. Who was I to believe?
Now, you returned to Sydney a few days later.
Yes. I saw the Inspector General again on the 5th of August, and he showed me a wire saying that nothing could be learned of Sister Liguori after an exhaustive search. The Inspector General said he would ring up Mr. Camfin, a magistrate who knew a lot about these matters. The Inspector General rang Mr. Camfin, and had a conversation with him. He told me Mr. Camfin was of opinion that he could issue a warrant on the information I had.
What happened next?
I then went to the Solicitor General's office, and Mr. Sproul very kindly offered to hear what I had to say. I gave him my account of the whole affair as far as I knew it and told him about Dr. Tivy's opinion. I think I also told him about the interview between the Inspector General and Mr. Camfin. I asked Mr. Sproul for advice, and he said that if he had the power he would issue a warrant on that information.
You then went and saw Mr. Camfin?
Yes. I told Mr. Camfin I had been informed that Dr. Tivy said she was normal and that Dr. Lay said she was of deranged mind and had given a sworn declaration to that effect. I then produced the letter which Sister Liguori had written to me, and Mr. Camfin said he would issue a warrant. Mr. Camfin said he wanted me to swear that I deemed her to be of unsound mind, and without visible means of support, and I did so.
Mr. Camfin then issued the warrant for Sister Liguori's arrest. Now, before moving on, why did you not apply to the magistrate at Wagga Wagga for the warrant?
I had applied to the local police and I was informed by Mr. Sheikey that the local court refused it, the magistrate declining to take the responsibility on himself without seeing the patient.
It was Dr. Lay who applied for the warrant in Wagga Wagga, which the local magistrate refused to issue. Did you instruct Dr. Lay to make that application?
No. That was somebody else. I asked Dr. Lay for a certificate.
Now, you did not tell the magistrate in Sydney that a warrant had been refused in Wagga Wagga. Why not?
He did not ask me.
And you did not think it important enough to mention it?
No.
You have acknowledged that you knew that Dr. Tivy had formed a different opinion to Dr. Lay. Why did you not speak to Dr. Tivy to discuss the grounds of his opinion?
First of all, he only had about 10 minutes or a quarter of an hour in which to examine her, and that would not let a medical man form any opinion one way or another. Secondly, Dr. Lay, who had known her for months, or perhaps years, had said that he thought she was mentally deranged.
But Dr. Lay's opinion as to Sister Liguori's state of mind was formed from the circumstances of her leaving the convent and the letter she wrote. You knew that Dr. Tivy had not seen that letter. Why did you not take it to him and ask him if it would change his opinion?
I did not think it was necessary for me to see Dr. Tivy. I did not think Dr. Tivy had had the opportunity Dr. Lay had of knowing the patient.
When applying for the warrant, did you believe the statements you swore about Sister Liguori being deemed to be of unsound mind and not having sufficient means of support?
Yes, I believed those statements.
Did you believe it to be your duty to have a warrant issued for her to be arrested by the police?
First, my duty was to try and take the place of the sisters who could not do what I was doing. I was appealed to by them, and I simply wanted to verify the state of the patient's condition. She had gone away from our keeping, and we did not know where she was. The police had failed to find her, and the only way left open to us was to get her examined by medical people, to find what her condition was. If she were declared to be sane by the authorities, my duty ceased, as far as her person was concerned. If she were declared to be insane, I had to see that the convent provided her with treatment in hospital until she became well, and if she wished to go back, she could go back, but if she wished to leave, I was to see that she was provided with the means to take her back to her own home again.
Thank you, Bishop Dwyer, for providing us with further information on this troubling case. And there we have it. The jury in the court case were asked 3 questions. Did the defendant, Bishop Dwyer, take reasonable care to inform himself as to the true facts of the case? Did he honestly believe the case which he laid before the magistrate? And was he actuated by malice? What do you think?